Hey there, take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let tonight's story gently guide you into a peaceful sleep. In the quiet folds of Willow Creek, a tiny village tucked into the Vermont hills where the world seemed to pause every winter, the snow began to fall one late December evening, soft and steady like a whispered lullaby from the heavens, blanketing the old clapboard houses and the narrow winding lanes in a hush so complete that even the wind held its breath. And old Eleanor Hayes, 78 years young with silver hair that still caught the lamplight like moonlight on water, sat by her kitchen window in the small farmhouse she'd shared with her late husband Thomas for 52 years, watching the flakes drift down in lazy spirals, each one unique yet part of the same gentle army that transformed the familiar into something sacred. And as the snow piled softly against the porch rails and muffled the distant creak of the ancient maple trees, she felt the familiar ache of memory rise like warm steam from the mug of chamomile tea cradled in her arthritic hands, remembering how Thomas used to stand right there at that very window on nights like this, his broad shoulders filling the frame, calling her over with that low, rumbling voice that always made her feel safe, saying, "Come look, Ellie, the world's putting on its Sunday best," and she'd slip her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against the wool of his flannel shirt that smelled of wood smoke and pine. And together they'd watch the village disappear under the white veil until only the golden glow from neighbors' windows remained like friendly lanterns in a dream. And now, decades after he'd passed quietly in his sleep one spring morning when the lilacs were just blooming, she still felt him there in the silence, not as a ghost but as a presence woven into the very air of the house, in the way the floorboard sighed under her slippers the same way they had under his boots, in the old rocking chair by the fireplace that still held the faint outline of his frame. And as the snow continued its endless, patient descent, erasing footprints from the day and smoothing the rough edges of the world, Eleanor let her mind wander back through the years like following a snowy path through the woods, back to when Willow Creek was even quieter than now, before the highway bypassed them and the young folks started leaving for cities with brighter lights and louder promises. Back to the winters of her childhood when her father would hitch up the sleigh horses and take the family into town for the Christmas tree lighting, the bells on the harness jingling softly through the falling snow, her mother wrapping them all in quilts that smelled of cedar and lavender, and they'd sing carols the whole way, voices rising clear and sweet into the frosty night. And later, when she was a young bride, how Thomas had built this very house with his own hands, board by board, during the long summer of '52, and how their first winter here the snow had come early and deep, trapping them happily inside for days with nothing but each other and the crackle of the fire, reading books aloud and making plans for the children they hoped would fill the empty rooms. And those children had come, 3 of them, robust and laughing, filling the house with the thunder of footsteps and the scent of wet mittens drying by the stove. And the winters then had been full of sledding down the big hill behind the church, building snow forts that lasted until March, hot cocoa with marshmallows melting into sweet clouds, and Thomas teaching the boys to chop wood while she and little Sarah baked cookies shaped like stars and bells. The kitchen windows fogged with warmth while outside the snow fell in thick, relentless curtains that made the world feel like their own private kingdom. And she remembered the year the big blizzard hit in '78, when the power went out for a week and the whole village pulled together, neighbors trudging through drifts to check on one another, sharing kerosene lamps and stories around kitchen tables. How Thomas had organized the men to clear the roads with shovels and sheer stubbornness, and how they'd all gathered in the community hall for a potluck by candlelight, children falling asleep on piles of coats while the adults sang old hymns and told tales of even harder winters their parents had endured. And through it all the snow kept falling, soft witness to their resilience, covering the hardships with beauty. And Eleanor smiled now at the memory, her eyes misty as she watched the flakes dance past the windowpane, thinking how life in Willow Creek had always moved to the rhythm of the seasons, slow and deliberate like the snow itself, never rushing, teaching patience the way the long winters taught appreciation for spring's first green shoots. And even as the years took their toll, Thomas gone, the children grown and scattered to Burlington and Boston and even as far as California, visiting when they could but always with the pull of their own busy lives. She had found a deep, abiding peace in the solitude. Because the village, though quieter now with many houses dark and for sale, still held the echoes of all those shared lives, and on nights like this, when the snow fell thick enough to muffle everything, she could almost hear them all again, the laughter of children long grown, the low murmur of conversations from porch to porch on summer evenings carried over on the breeze, the church bell ringing clear on Sunday mornings, and she thought of old Mr. Whitaker who used to play his fiddle at the harvest dance. His bow drawing out tunes that made even the shyest feet tap, and Mrs. Langford who kept the little library in her front room, recommending books with the same care she gave her prize-winning roses, and young Billy Thompson who delivered the mail on his bicycle summer and winter, always with a joke or a kind word, even after he lost his wife to cancer and had to raise his daughter alone. And how the whole village had rallied around him the way they always did, bringing casseroles and sitting with him through the long nights, because in Willow Creek silence wasn't emptiness, it was space for caring, for memories to settle gently like the snow itself, and as the hours slipped by and the snow deepened, turning the night into a world of soft grays and blues lit only by the moon's pale glow filtering through the clouds, Eleanor rose slowly from her chair, her knees protesting just a bit, and moved to the living room where the fire had burned down to glowing embers, adding a few logs from the stack Thomas had split the last autumn of his life, watching the flames catch and dance, casting flickering shadows on the walls adorned with faded photographs, their wedding day in the little white church, Thomas in his army uniform before shipping out to Korea, the children posed stiffly in their Easter best, grandchildren with gap-toothed grins holding fish they'd caught in the creek, and she settled into the rocking chair, pulling a quilt over her lap, the one her mother had pieced from old dresses and shirts, each square holding a fragment of story, and let the rhythm of the rocker and the soft pop of the fire lull her into deeper reverie, thinking about how the snow always brought clarity, stripping away the clutter of daily worries and leaving only what mattered. The warmth of love that lingered long after bodies faded, the quiet strength of community that held people together through loss and change, the simple miracle of nature renewing itself year after year. And she remembered the winter Sarah had come home from college heartbroken over a boy who'd chosen someone else, how they'd sat up all night by this same fire, Eleanor listening without judgment, offering only the comfort of presence and hot tea, and how by morning, with fresh snow sparkling outside, Sarah had found her smile again, saying, "Mom, it's going to be okay," and it had been, because time, like the snow, covers the sharp edges and makes way for new growth, and Eleanor felt that truth now in her bones, a profound relaxation settling over her as she watched the firelight play across the room, her breathing slowing to match the gentle fall outside, and she thought of the stray cat that had shown up last winter, thin and wary, how she'd left food on the porch and gradually earned its trust until it became a regular visitor, curling now on the hearth rug with a contented purr that vibrated through the quiet, a small living warmth in the big old house, and beyond the windows the village slept under its white comforter, the old mill by the frozen creek silent, the steeple of the church a dark silhouette against the sky, no cars stirring, no lights but hers and perhaps old Doc Ellis down the lane who liked to read late into the night, and in this profound stillness, Eleanor felt connected to everything, to the generations who had lived and loved here before her, to the land itself with its ancient rocks and patient trees, to her faraway children dreaming in their city beds, to Thomas wherever gentle souls go when they leave their earthly homes, and a deep, wordless gratitude filled her, not dramatic or tearful but quiet and steady like the snowfall itself. And as the clock on the mantel chimed softly 11 times, she let her eyes drift closed, the quilt warm around her shoulders, the cats purr a gentle lullaby, the fire settling into embers, the snow still falling outside in endless, soothing silence, covering the world in peace, and in that moment Willow Creek was not a place of loss or loneliness but a sanctuary where time softened, where memories lived comfortably alongside the present, where the heart could rest fully, deeply, completely, wrapped in the tender embrace of a winter night that promised, as all winters do, that morning would come with its crisp light and perhaps a visitor knocking at the door with fresh-baked bread or news from town, but for now there was only this beautiful, heart-touching quiet, this relaxing drift into dreams where Thomas waited with his hand outstretched, smiling that same smile that had won her heart all those years ago, and Eleanor slept at last. The snow continuing its ancient work outside, blanketing the silent village in layers of forgiveness and renewal, one flake at a time, through the long, gentle night. And as Eleanor rocked gently in her chair, the fire's soft glow casting warm patterns across the quilt on her lap, her mind drifted further back, pulled by the endless whisper of the snow outside into the deepest wells of childhood, those golden winters of the 1930s and early 1940s when Willow Creek felt like the very center of the universe. A small world complete unto itself where every neighbor knew your name and your troubles before you even spoke them, and her family's farmhouse, though not yet the one she lived in now, but the older one down by the creek where her parents had raised her and her two brothers, stood sturdy against the gales, its wide porch perfect for watching storms roll in over the hills. And she remembered how the first real snowfall of the season was always greeted with pure wonder, the way she'd press her nose to the frosted windowpane in the upstairs bedroom she shared with her little brother Henry, watching the flakes appear out of the gray sky like tiny feathers shaken from an angel's wing, and how her mother would call up the stairs in that warm, melodic voice, "Ellie, come down now. Breakfast is hot and the world's turning white," and they'd all gather around the big oak table in the kitchen, the wood stove crackling and popping, sending out waves of heat that made the windows steam, while her father poured thick cream over bowls of oatmeal and told stories of winters past, his deep voice steady and reassuring, speaking of the blizzard of '88 that his own father had lived through, when snow drifted so high it buried the fences and the men had to tunnel out to reach the barn, and young Eleanor, barely 8 or 9, would listen wide-eyed, spoon paused halfway to her mouth, imagining those heroic days, and after breakfast her mother would bundle them up, long underwear, wool stockings pulled high, hand-knitted mittens and scarves that smelled of lanolin and mothballs, heavy coats with buttons big as silver dollars, and out they'd go into the transformed yard, the snow already knee-deep on her, crisp and sparkling under the weak winter sun, and her older brother Jack would start the snowball fight without warning, packing a perfect sphere and lobbing it gently at her back, and she'd squeal and chase him around the old apple trees, their branches bowed low with white loads, while Henry toddled behind trying to keep up, his cheeks turning rosy as apples, and their father would harness the big Percheron horses, Bess and Bill, to the sleigh with its red runners polished smooth, the bells on the harness jingling merrily as they set off for chores or visits, the runners hissing over the snow like whispers, and she loved those rides best of all, nestled between her parents under bearskin robes that her grandfather had tanned, the horses' breath steaming in great clouds, the world gliding by in silence broken only by the creak of leather and the soft thud of hooves, passing neighbors' farms where smoke rose straight up from chimneys into the still air, and sometimes they'd stop at the Thompsons' place where Mrs. Thompson would invite them in for coffee and fresh donuts still warm from the fat, the kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and friendship, and Eleanor would sit quietly on a stool, swinging her legs, listening to the adults talk about the weather and the crops and who was sick over in the next hollow, feeling the deep security of belonging to this web of lives intertwined like the roots under the snow. And then there were the evenings. After supper, when the family gathered in the parlor, the oil lamps casting golden pools of light, her mother at the sewing machine treadling away mending overalls or piecing a new quilt while her father read aloud from the Bible or from the almanac or sometimes from a treasured copy of Little Women that had been her mother's as a girl, his voice rising and falling like the wind outside. And the boys would whittle or play checkers on the rug while Eleanor curled up with her rag doll Amanda, stitching tiny clothes for her from scraps. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to my Stories vs AI channel. Now, let's get back to the story. Dreaming of the day she'd have a real family of her own, and on special nights her father would take down his fiddle from the shelf and play old tunes, Turkey in the Straw, or Oh Susanna, the bow dancing across the strings, making the whole room feel alive, and her mother would hum along, sometimes pulling Eleanor up for a little twirl around the furniture, skirts flying, laughter bubbling up like spring water, and even when times were hard, like during the Depression when money was scarce and her father had to take extra work at the mill, the snow seemed to soften everything, covering the bare fields and the worries alike, making the world feel generous again, and she remembered the Christmas of 1935 when money was tightest, how her parents had whispered late into the nights planning. And on Christmas morning there under the tree they'd cut from their own woods and decorated with popcorn strings and paper chains was a beautiful store-bought doll with real hair and eyes that closed. The most extravagant gift she'd ever received, and how she'd cried happy tears into her mother's apron, understanding even then the sacrifice it represented, and how the whole village had come together that year for a community Christmas supper in the schoolhouse, everyone bringing what they could, a ham or a jar of pickles or a pie, and the children putting on a pageant with shepherd's robes made from old sheets. Eleanor as an angel with tinfoil wings that crinkled when she moved, singing Silent Night, in her clear child's voice while snow tapped gently at the windows like applause, and afterward skating on the frozen pond under lantern light, her father's strong hand holding hers as they glided across the ice, the stars so bright overhead they seemed close enough to touch, and she felt in those moments that life was perfect. That the snow was a gift sent to make everything beautiful and still, to give time for families to draw close and hearts to open. And there were quieter memories too, like the long afternoons when school was closed for snow days and she'd bundle up and tramp through the woods alone, following animal tracks, deer slots deep and delicate, rabbit prints in hopping patterns, the occasional bold fox trail, until she reached her secret spot by the big boulder where the creek made a little waterfall. Even in winter, ice forming in lacy curtains along the edges, and she'd sit there on a log, mittens tucked under her arms, just listening to the hush, the way the snow absorbed sound until her own heartbeat seemed loud, and she'd talk to God then, in simple child words, thanking Him for the beauty and asking Him to keep her family safe, feeling a profound peace that settled into her bones like the cold itself, a peace she carried all her life. And she remembered the winter her grandmother came to live with them after Grandpa passed, how the old woman with her snow-white hair and endless stories would sit by the stove knitting endless scarves, telling tales of coming to Vermont as a bride in a covered wagon, of Indian summers and hard frosts, of dances in barns lit by lanterns where young men in their best vests courted girls in calico dresses, and Eleanor would soak it all in, learning the history of the place woven into her blood, understanding that Willow Creek wasn't just houses and fields but layers of lives lived with courage and kindness, and even the sad memories held sweetness now. The winter Henry caught pneumonia and they feared for his life. How the whole family took turns sitting by his bed reading stories and singing softly, how neighbors brought broth and quilts, how the doctor came on snowshoes through the storm, and how one morning the fever broke and Henry opened his eyes asking for cocoa, and they all wept with relief around his bed, the snow outside beginning to melt in the February thaw as if celebrating with them. And through all these recollections Eleanor felt the years fold together like the quilt on her lap, childhood. Not gone but present in every breath, in the way she still loved the smell of wood smoke and the sound of bells, in the patience she'd learned from long winters waiting for spring, and as the fire burned lower and the cat stretched and resettled, she smiled into the darkness, her heart full and relaxed, the snow still falling softly outside the window, carrying her gently toward sleep on wings of memory, where young Ellie waited with open arms in a world made new and silent by the endless, tender gift of snow. And as the memories of her childhood winters lingered like the soft glow of embers in the hearth, Eleanor's thoughts turned naturally to the family traditions that had woven through her life like threads in her mother's quilts, strong and colorful, binding generations together with rituals born of necessity and love. Starting with those from her own early years in the old farmhouse by the creek where every season had its sacred customs but winter held the deepest ones, the ones that warmed the soul against the cold, like the annual making of the Christmas pudding on Stir-Up Sunday, the last Sunday before Advent, when her mother would gather everyone in the kitchen after church, the air already rich with the scent of spices as she measured out suet and flour, raisins and currants that had been soaking in brandy since fall, and each family member, her father with his big hands gentle as he cracked eggs, Jack stirring with youthful vigor, Henry on a stool reaching to add the crumbs, and Eleanor carefully folding in the silver coins for luck, would take a turn stirring the heavy batter clockwise for good fortune, making wishes as the wooden spoon creaked in the bowl, wishes whispered silently like secrets to the steam rising up, and then the pudding would be wrapped in cheesecloth and steamed for hours, filling the house with a fragrance that meant Christmas was truly coming, and later hung in the cool pantry to age until Christmas Day, when it was flambéed with more brandy, the blue flames dancing magically as her father carried it to the table, everyone clapping and hoping to find a coin in their slice for prosperity in the new year. And there was the tradition of the Yule log, her father venturing out into the woods on the shortest day to select a massive oak log from their own land, dragging it home behind the horses while the children ran alongside cheering. And on Christmas Eve it was brought in with great ceremony, sprinkled with cider and flour for blessings, and lit from a piece saved from the previous year's log to carry the light forward, burning slowly through the 12 days of Christmas while stories were told around it, no one allowed to let it go out lest bad luck follow, and Eleanor remembered how she'd sit closest to the fire, her stocking feet toasting, listening to her grandmother recount tales of old English customs brought over by ancestors, feeling the continuity like a warm hand on her shoulder. And then there were the smaller daily traditions that made winter bearable and beautiful, like the evening cocoa ritual after chores, when they'd all troop in from the barn with cheeks stung red by wind, stamping snow from boots in the mudroom, and her mother would have the enamel pot simmering on the stove with real chocolate shaved in and fresh milk from their cows, topped with a dollop of cream whipped by hand. And they'd sit around the table sharing the day's small adventures, who'd seen the most deer tracks, or how best the horse had snorted at a snowdrift, laughter echoing off the beams, strengthening the bonds that no distance could later break. And when Eleanor married Thomas in the spring of 1950, they carried many of these traditions into their new home like treasured heirlooms, adapting them to their growing family. Starting with the first Christmas in the house he'd built, when they cut their own tree from the back pasture, Thomas lifting her up to place the star on top while she laughed at his teasing, and they began the pudding tradition anew, now with their own children stirring and wishing, the coins becoming dimes and quarters as times changed, but the magic the same, and Thomas added his own touches. Like the New Year's Eve bonfire in the yard where neighbors gathered to burn the old calendar pages and greet the year with sparks flying up to join the stars, hot cider passed around in tin mugs, voices raised in Auld Lang Syne, a bit off-key but heartfelt, and there was the tradition of the winter solstice lantern walk, inspired by something he'd read in a magazine, where the family would craft simple lanterns from jars and candles and walk the snowy lanes after supper, their lights bobbing like fireflies in the dark, stopping to sing carols at elderly neighbors' doors, bringing cookies or a jar of preserves, receiving in return smiles and invitations for cocoa. That sometimes turned into hours of stories shared, knitting the village closer, and with the children came new traditions born of their energy, the annual snowman building contest on the first big snowfall. Thomas judging with mock seriousness, awarding prizes like extra marshmallows or the privilege of choosing the radio station for a week, the snowmen growing more elaborate each year with carrot noses and charcoal eyes, old hats and scarves donated cheerfully, standing sentinel until spring melted them away, and the indoor traditions too, like the reading of A Christmas Carol, aloud over several evenings in December, Thomas doing all the voices from Scrooge's grumble to Tiny Tim's sweet timbre. The children rapped on the rug, learning early the lessons of generosity and redemption, pausing to discuss what they'd do if visited by ghosts, their answers innocent and profound. And there was the baking day tradition, always the Saturday before Christmas, when the kitchen became a flower-dusted wonderland, Eleanor and Sarah rolling out dough for sugar cookies cut into bells and trees and stars, the boys pressing out gingerbread men with button eyes, the oven turning out batch after batch while Christmas records played on the hi-fi, Bing Crosby crooning, "White Christmas," as snow fell outside in perfect harmony, and later decorating with icings in bright colors, sprinkles scattered like confetti, the children licking fingers and arguing good-naturedly over who got to hang the candy canes on the tree, and even in harder times, like when money was tight after the farm crisis in the 80s and the children were teenagers with part-time jobs, the traditions held firm, becoming anchors. Simpler perhaps, with homemade gifts wrapped in newspaper comics, but richer in meaning, like the year they revived the old storytelling circle around the Yule log when power went out during an ice storm, candles flickering as each shared a memory or a dream. Thomas starting with how he fell in love with Eleanor at the county fair, making her blush even after 30 years, the children groaning but secretly treasuring it, and after the children left home, Eleanor and Thomas kept the traditions alive in quieter ways, just the two of them stirring the pudding and making wishes for their family's health, walking the lanes with lanterns on Solstice Eve though their steps were slower, leaving cookies on porches for neighbors who might be alone, and after Thomas passed, Eleanor continued them still, solitary but not lonely, because traditions are bridges across time, stirring the pudding alone now but feeling all their hands in hers, lighting a small Yule log in the fireplace and saving a piece for next year, baking a batch of cookies to share with Doc Ellis or the young family who'd moved into the old Whitaker place, carrying forward the light and warmth that her parents had given her, that she'd given her children, who now carried pieces of it to their own homes, Sarah calling every stir-up Sunday to say her kids were stirring and wishing for Grandma's long life, the boys sending photos of their snowmen with captions joking about Dad's judging standards, and in this continuity Eleanor found profound comfort as she rocked by the fire, the snow still drifting down outside in its timeless rhythm, her heart relaxed and full with the knowledge that family traditions weren't just repeated actions but living threads of love, weaving through loss and change, holding everything together in the quiet sanctuary of Willow Creek, where the past and present rested easily side by side under the gentle, unending snowfall, lulling her deeper toward peaceful dreams where all the dear voices joined in harmony around the glowing hearth. And as the threads of family tradition settled warmly in her heart like the quilt across her knees, Eleanor's thoughts expanded outward from her own hearth to the wider web of Willow Creek's village-wide holiday customs, those cherished communal rituals that turned the long winter nights into a tapestry of shared light and song, binding the scattered farms and houses into one beating heart under the snow, beginning with the annual Christmas tree lighting in the village green on the first Saturday in December, when everyone bundled up and gathered at dusk around the towering spruce that the men had cut from the town forest and erected with ropes and good-natured grumbling, strings of colored lights wound carefully around its branches, lights that had been stored in the church basement since the year before, some bulbs flickering but treasured all the same, and the mayor, old Mr. Hargrove back then with his booming voice, would give a short speech about community and gratitude. While children fidgeted in their snowsuits, breath fogging the air, until finally the switch was flipped and the tree blazed to life in a cascade of red and green and gold, everyone oohing and awing as the brass band from the high school struck up, "Oh Christmas Tree," horns gleaming under the new glow, and afterward there'd be hot cocoa poured from massive thermoses donated by the diner, with marshmallows bobbing like tiny snowballs, and cookies passed around on trays, neighbors greeting one another with hugs and updates on grandchildren or new calves born in the barn. The snow often beginning to fall right then as if on cue, soft flakes catching in the lights like glittering confetti, and Eleanor remembered her first tree lighting as a married woman in 1950, holding Thomas's gloved hand tight as they stood with his parents, feeling truly part of the village at last, and later when their own children were small, bundling them into the old wooden sleigh to ride down the lane, bells jingling, arriving rosy-cheeked and wide-eyed to see the tree sparkle, the boys dashing off to play tag with friends while Sarah clung to her skirt, whispering questions about Santa's reindeer, and through the years the custom never changed much, even as faces aged and new ones arrived, the lighting always a beacon drawing folks from their isolated farms into the warm circle of light, reminding them they were never truly alone. And then there was the caroling tradition that followed a week later, when groups formed organically after church on a chosen evening, lanterns and flashlights in hand, song sheets mimeographed at the library, trudging through the snow from house to house singing the old favorites, Joy to the World, and Deck the Halls, and always Silent Night, to close, voices rising clear into the frosty air, sometimes a bit shaky from cold but full of spirit, and at each stop the homeowners would invite the carolers in for a few minutes of warmth, offering cider, or fudge or a slice of fruitcake, sharing laughter and news, and Eleanor loved being part of the group that included the church choir director Mrs. Ellis with her pitch-perfect soprano leading the way, and young folks adding harmony, stopping at shut-ins homes especially, like old widow Jenkins who would sit in her rocker with tears in her eyes listening, pressing a few homemade candies into cold hands as thanks, and one memorable year in the 60s when a big storm threatened, the carolers went anyway on snowshoes and sleds, their lights bobbing through the drifts like a procession of stars, singing extra loud at each door to cheer the village through the isolation, and Thomas had pulled Eleanor close that night whispering how proud he was to live in such a place, his breath warm against her ear, and even after he was gone she joined the carolers when she could, her voice softer now but still true, finding joy in seeing new generations carry the lanterns. And there were the holiday potlucks in the community hall, held between Christmas and New Year's when the roads were clear enough, long tables groaning under casseroles and hams and pies brought by every family, the hall decorated with greens cut from the woods and paper snowflakes made by the schoolchildren, a massive punch bowl of eggnog, spiked and unspiked versions, presided over by whoever volunteered. And after eating there'd be games like white elephant gift exchanges with much hooting over the silliest presents, or musical chairs for the kids. And always dancing to records or live music if someone brought a guitar or accordion, couples young and old twirling across the creaky floor, Eleanor remembering how Thomas would swing her around to Winter Wonderland, until they were breathless and laughing, collapsing into chairs to watch the children, and in later years she'd sit with the widow's circle, sipping coffee and swapping stories of holidays past, feeling the deep comfort of shared history, and the New Year's Eve gathering at the pond for skating and fireworks. When families brought lanterns to hang in the trees around the frozen water, skates laced up over boots, gliding under the stars while someone tended a bonfire on the shore roasting marshmallows and chestnuts, the air filled with the crackle of wood and the scrape of blades on ice. And at midnight the men would set off fireworks saved from summer, bursts of color blooming over the snow-covered hills, everyone cheering and hugging, toasting the new year with thermos cocoa or something stronger. Passed discreetly, a moment of pure communal hope, and Eleanor thought of the year Sarah had her first kiss under those fireworks with a boy from town, coming back to the fire with shining eyes, or the quiet New Year after Thomas passed when neighbors made sure she wasn't alone, skating slowly beside her and talking softly of him, their kindness a balm deeper than words. And there were smaller customs too, like the leaving of porch lights on all through the 12 days to guide travelers or spirits, or just to say welcome, or the exchange of simple handmade gifts among neighbors, a jar of jam, a knitted scarf, a wooden toy whittled in spare hours, delivered with a knock and a quick visit, no expectation of return but the warmth of giving, and the village nativity play put on by the Sunday school children in the church, with real hay in the manger and live animals borrowed from farms. The congregation packed in pews wrapped in coats, singing along to the carols between scenes. Little angels with crooked halos stealing the show, and Eleanor had sewn countless costumes over the years, from shepherd robes to wise men's crowns, treasuring the excited hugs from the children, and through all these customs the snow played its part, sometimes gentle witness, sometimes active participant in sledding parties or snowball fights that broke out spontaneously, always softening the world into a place where hearts opened easier, where old grudges melted away in the shared joy, and even as Willow Creek grew quieter with fewer young families, the customs endured in smaller ways, the tree still lit though with fewer in attendance, caroling groups smaller but voices no less fervent, potlucks held with whatever was on hand but the fellowship just as rich, and Eleanor felt profound gratitude for it all as she rocked slowly, the fire's embers glowing like distant holiday lights, the snow outside continuing its quiet benediction over the village, wrapping every house in the same peaceful embrace, carrying the echoes of songs and laughter through the night, lulling her deeper into relaxation where past and present mingled in perfect harmony, the heart full and resting in the timeless beauty of a community held together by light and snow and love. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to my Stories Verse AI channel. As this story fades away, let your thoughts drift, your body relax, and may you fall into the deepest, calmest sleep. Good night.